Hey, this is Notser, and we're talking about concealment expertise. I'm bringing this up because viewers have been curious of my opinion on this topic, and it came at a bad time for me. But now, life's a little bit better, not by much, but it's better enough that I can actually have a conversation on it. Game in the background is myself and the Tier 10 Japanese battleship, Yamato, and we just double citadeled that Worcester. Serves you right, my friend. Don't camp on the corner. And concealment expertise is what's being altered. Build is on the screen, by the way. This was brought up because of the CV rework. The CV rework is going to introduce a bunch of commander skill changes, as you might imagine. Mostly AA related, but Wargaming has decided to adjust concealment expertise. Now, concealment expertise, the level 4 skill for your commander, does the following right now. It improves the concealment of destroyers by 10%, cruisers 12%, battleships 14%, and aircraft carriers 16%. It's a scaled improvement. It's always been. We expect it to always be. And this skill is universally taken. So you just have to act like it's always on everything. And you know what? I've made commentary before on this very topic. I don't like it when a skill is so universal that everyone takes it. Now, will this adjustment discourage players from taking it? Well, they're changing it to 10% across the board, so the DDs aren't changing. Everyone else is getting nerfed in their concealment. They also are introducing a concealment modifier for squadrons. That's the whole point for the change. But it's a big change. It's a huge change. I don't want to talk about it. So, concealment expertise. Basically, at the start of the game, people had no idea what they were doing. And battleships were ignoring situation awareness, which is the skill that's baked in right now, and concealment expertise. They felt like there wasn't enough to gain from it. And of course, now that we've played the game for a really long time, we know that that's completely false. Commander skills like concealment expertise, they are incredibly powerful. They're so powerful that everyone takes them. And they don't even blink about the 4 points. And for them to be changed, and for it to be still good, it's still a skill that everyone's going to take. It's just a weaker skill for battleships and cruisers and aircraft carriers, but it's really battleships and cruisers that get the real worse end of this. It's still a skill that people are going to take. It's still mandatory. It's just mandatorily nerfing battleships and cruisers with no adjustment. And I don't know that I agree with that. Right? Whenever I looked at this was on the heels of the Battleship AP conversation. And this is all testing. This is not final. But the Battleship AP is where it only does 10% of the shell damage, which is an overpin against DDs. It'll never stick in the ship, except for the Kaba and Harugamo. That conversation's very volatile. To me, I think that it should be scaled. I think a battleship at 10 kilometers, absolutely. But a battleship at 15 kilometers, and it's just, with the improved accuracy of the guns, you've got legendary modules like Yamato. I mean, it's really easy to hit a target if you have practice at ranges that are extended out. And that's where it feels really cheesy. That's where the Battleship AP. But if you implement this change, where you have DDs gaining in their power against battleships and cruisers, well, I don't know that they necessarily need the Battleship AP change. Because this is a very significant change. You're telling DDs, your play is just fine. There's nothing that needs to be changed. We love you guys. But you're telling battleships and cruisers, you know what? Your concealment's not that important. We're going to make this change whether you like it or not. Oh, and by the way, the skill's still there, so you're still going to have to take it. What? I wish the skill wasn't so good, Wargaming. I wish you would just take it out of the game and bake it into all the ships. I really do. Because then I wouldn't feel like I'm hamstrung to take it. Even in its weakened state, it's still really good. But with the changes to different power level, there is some appeal there. cruisers gaining concealment on battleships is a good thing. Battleships, under certain specs, under certain conditions, had easily better concealment than a lot of cruisers at high tier. And that's really weird, isn't it? It's really weird that a battleship can get 11.1 or 11.8 kilometer concealment at tier 10. And you look over at cruisers who are max concealed, by the way. They've got concealment modules and concealment skills. They're lucky if they break 12. I mean, there's a lot of weirdness there. Superstructures super tall, they take up a ton of real estate in the water. You get the idea. I do think, though, that cruisers should be better concealed than battleships. And there should be a nice, safe gap. You know, as long as a battleship can engage the cruiser, everything's fine. He doesn't need to be better concealed or as concealed as he is right now. But I think the relationship between battleships and destroyers is very, very important. And that relationship cannot be tweaked too much. I think we're right at that spot where I think a battleship feels like there is hope that he could conceal himself. You know, based on his maneuverability, based on all that stuff. And, you know, maybe that still exists. Maybe it's only in our minds that this range adjustment is so universally crippling to battleships and cruisers and aircraft carriers. But the game relationship is really important. And I don't know, Wargaming, that you want to make this kind of change. I mean, this is a mandatory skill, and you're just lowering the power of the skill, the ships that the skill changes. Now, you could bake it in. That would be exciting. Wouldn't that be awesome if Wargaming decided, oh no, we're going to bake in the concealment and you're going to get the exact same concealment as you did prior? Well, then if you're going to do that, why don't you just go all the way? Make concealment a skill that doesn't exist anymore. Replace it with something more interesting, something that encourages aggressive play, because a 10% across the board commander skill, that's not very sexy. That doesn't really add anything to me. And it's still a mandatory skill. I take it on every build. Literally every build. Secondaries, AA, fire, damage, anything and everything. Concealment is good. So for me, Wargaming, this is sort of a half measure into the worst possible solution. Whereas if you just go full on, get rid of it. Bake it in. And then introduce something that rewards aggressive play across the board. Just something to get people on the map. Something to give people hope and chance. And, you know, maybe that's too big of a change that we want to talk about. But that's what I've always felt about the skill. I've always felt the commander skill for concealment was unnecessary. It's just something that was put into the game so that we would have some direction to take. Oh, yes. Some direction to take, right? But we're more informed. There's more support. We can have skills that change the way the ship plays and be proud of that. So I would just encourage Wargaming to maybe consider a larger change than just nerfing a mandatory skill that is still mandatory after the nerf. I've experienced that in World of Warcraft. Can I tell you how unfun that is? Yeah, you have a skill that is mandatory, and it's, you know, just weaker. and then you might have the conversation, well, Notser, if you feel like the skill is still mandatory, at what threshold would it not be? I don't think that threshold exists. I think that it's just too universally good. Defense, offense, disengage, objective play, everything. Concealment is everything. And when everyone realized that, then the skill became too universal, in my opinion. That's when it needed to be dropped. But it doesn't look like Wargaming wants to make that change. In fact, Wargaming seems to be making systems that don't expressly take advantage of it. Case in point, submarines. Submarines do not benefit from Concealment Expert. You need to pay attention to that because you're going to be able to spec submarines in the Halloween event in 2 or 3 days. Commander skill, Concealment Expert, does nothing for them. And I think they still wanted to do nothing, even though they plan to introduce the type into the game. Well, if you're going to introduce a type in the game that doesn't need the skill, why do we need the skill at all? Everything is universally good by it. It always improves everything. It's in every build. Just take it out. Just replace it with something more interesting. Force players to have to really spec into something. Tank ability. Secondaries. Offensive. Maybe make it an offensive skill. And, force players to decide on whether they want to take that or not. I don't know. Maybe when you fire your gun, you have a faster time reconcealing. I don't know. Something more interesting, wargaming, than Concealment Expert. I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to give people value in the skill while also rebalancing it to be more fair. But what you're ending up doing is just making a mandatory skill worse for those who have to take it. And that's my feeling on this whole thing. I love the game to bits. I love the commander skills. This is so much better than World of Tanks Wargaming. The ability to spec into something that changes the way you play the game. That's great. And that's what I want. That's all I want. And I don't know that you're going to get it by just making this adjustment. And, maybe I'm wrong. In the comments, what do you think of Wargaming changing this skill like this? Do you feel like it's less mandatory as a Battleship player, as a Cruiser player? Do you think it's more mandatory? Well, I don't know if it could ever be more, but there might be someone out there that feels like it's more mandatory now. I didn't see any announcement from Wargaming that they would just bake in the prior concealment of all these ships. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything at all related to all of that. This is obviously a work in progress from a commander skill standpoint. The game is not a work in progress. This was Yamato and whatever. But yeah, if they make this change and they don't adjust it, its intent was to nerf battleships and nerf cruisers and nerf the concealment of aircraft carriers. I mean, that's a pretty big change. And to have no conversation, well, I think we need more information to really feel like I could vent on this. But as a community contributor who has said in the past, concealment expertise is a skill that's so mandatory it should be removed. It's a skill that will still be so mandatory, and I still feel like it should be removed, replaced with something else. I think there should be clear archetype directions that you could take every ship. You should be able to be defensive, offensive. You should be able to be tanky or utilitarian. All of these things are completely legitimate, but I just don't feel like enough commander skills reinforce this option for players. I feel like a skill like concealment expertise, it's good for everything. And if it's a skill that's good for everything, then maybe the skill is not good for anything. It doesn't offer any unique design to get people customizing to what they want. They're just doing what works best. So, that's my thoughts on all this stuff. The commander skill is incredibly important. Obviously, it's probably the most extensive change for the game, just based on how many people take it. I mean, it's on every ship in the game, every build includes it, everyone considers it, it's everywhere. It's just too universal wargaming. If you make this change, even if you change it 1%, it would be a change across the board because everyone has it. Now, as far as this game is concerned, we did pretty good. 5 kills, cracking a range, 2,616 base XP, and we walloped some guys. I hope you enjoyed this, sharing the thoughts, love the conversation. I'm really excited to hear what you think about this concealment change. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.